Hi there, this is John with WesleyGospel.com. What to do about women preachers. You know, it's a complicated emotional subject. Um, Obviously, I believe women can speak to mixed audiences in special situations. That's why I posted the Julie Roy's message. Um, but what I do not believe is biblically okay is I do not believe there's any support in the Word of God whatsoever for a woman to be a senior pastor of a church. So, uh, sorry, all my Wesleyan hearers, but that's just what I honestly believe. John Wesley never allowed any women to be a pastor of a Methodist Episcopal church in his lifetime. He did allow them to speak sometimes, but not to become pastors of churches. And I don't know everything about John Wesley's views on that. Someday I hope I will have a more complete view. But I do know that Wesley and Clark hammered out the way for women to be prophetesses because they believed in miraculous gifts. They believed in dreams and visions and things like this. And so women are usually more sensitive than men are about that stuff. And so that gave occurrence for them to sometimes stand up in meetings, cell group meetings, and share their experiences that had to then be tested by the group. So that's where it really came from. First Corinthians 11, 1 and following says, "Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Now I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions even as I delivered them to you. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ, the head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head, but every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head." What are we talking about here? This is not about head coverings as much as it is about male leadership and female submission. Lovingly. Adam and Eve in the garden, Eve submitting lovingly to her husband, and so forth. And that's what's talking. I mean, this is about avoiding emasculation of men. Okay, that's what it's about. Now, notice the woman who is in church prophesies, but she does so in a way that submits to male leadership. That's what the covering of the head is. Now, what is that? If you go on further, the head covering is the long hair. Now, there's a debate about whether a long-haired woman should have another head covering on top of the long hair. I think 1 Corinthians 11 makes it clear that the long hair is a natural head covering. If you really want to get hardcore on this topic, read the offensively titled pamphlet called "Bobbed Hair, Bossy Wives and Women Preachers" by Dr. John R. Rice. In his characteristic fundamentalist manner. But he's extremely thorough on all those points. And now, Luke 2:36, there was a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years, having lived with her husband 7 years from when she was a virgin, and then as a widow until she was 84. She did not depart from the temple, worshiping with fasting and prayer night and day. See, she was a vision seer. She was satisfied by that alone, satisfied by God's Spirit alone. So what happens when a woman of God receives revelation? She's going to talk about it. Right? She's going to talk about it. Therefore, women preacher. Now, what is not okay was when we're talking about a female pastor, and unfortunately in many of our Wesleyan churches we have this uncritically since the days of Phoebe Palmer. But You might say, well, what about Catherine Booth? Catherine Booth wrote a book on women preaching, but she did not. I don't think she was a women pastor. Maybe she was after her husband died, but not while her husband was alive. And there was nobody who was a woman pastor in John Wesley's time. But there was liberality and flexibility about this your daughter shall prophesy thing, which is in Acts 2. So again, it comes out of a charismatic ecclesiology. When you have people experiencing charismatic things, that means you're going to have women experiencing charismatic things. And that means they're going to see visions. And that means they're going to want to talk about it. And that means you have a woman preacher, at least for a moment. This developed by the time of Catherine Booth, or maybe even before that, I don't know, but this developed into women preaching entire full-length sermons. I think that was a mistake, to be perfectly honest, because what you have there is women laying down the law on men. But does that mean Julie Roys did wrong? No, I don't think so. She's a journalist. She's not seeking, she's been put in a tough spot, and she's trying to do her job. Okay, and that's a different scenario in my opinion. She did a good job though, speaking that message out. But women, the rules in the Bible about this are usually about avoiding the emasculation of men, because where you have women bossing men around in the pulpit, you end up with a bunch of effeminate, girly men in the church. I've seen it. That's why it says in 1 Timothy 2:11-12, a woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. What's that talking about? That's saying, don't do what Catherine Booth did. Don't preach full-length sermons to men. It's wrong. Okay? But what about a women's conference? Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Because the issue isn't that women shouldn't preach long lectures. The issue is that they shouldn't preach long lectures to men in an authoritative manner, which would emasculate them over time. That's the issue. In other words, when we have bossy women preachers preaching at men, they turn into a bunch of homosexuals. That's essentially what it boils down to. This is why she does not usurp authority over the man. So that's the issue. If you really want to look into it, that's the issue. Every time this issue is mentioned, it's not that we want to quiet or silence women. It's because of the emasculation, the effeminacy, and the homosexuality issue that can come when men lose their proper sense of authority and courage and boldness and backbone because women are bossing them around. And you end up with this macrocosm of the microcosm, where you have women wearing pants in the family, and then you also have women wearing pants in the church, right? You know what I mean? Where they're bossing men around, and wives are bossing their husbands around, right? So that's, if you really want to go deep, really deep into this, look at John Piper's book and Wayne Grudem's book on manhood and womanhood. Biblical manhood and womanhood, and they go really, really deep on that. But that's what it boils down to. It's an emasculation issue. We don't want a bunch of gay, girly, sissy men in the church. But how are we going to get to that point? Just put a bunch of bossy women bossing guys around. That's all we need. And we got a bunch of sissy guys everywhere. All right? That's it, dude. That's what the Bible teaches. That's what the Bible teaches. Do you imagine Eve bossing Adam around? No way. That's not part of the Genesis narrative. Do you imagine Eve bossing Adam around? Eat this apple. Now. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay, so that's why. That's why. 1 Timothy 2:12 says what it says. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. This is talking about, look, don't be a woman pastor. It's wrong. Women's ministries are fine. Women's conferences, women's Bible study groups, totally okay. But it's when you're preaching exercising authority over man, as Dr. John R. Rice used to say, bobbed hair, bossy wives, and women preachers, that's when there's cause for concern. God bless out there. This is John with WesleyGospel.com.